I recently did an article for Investor Place Media where I discussed, the question that has been coming up quite frequently in this year's election cycle, which is which party is better for the economy? Now, when you look on the internet, you do a Google search for which party is better for the economy, more often than not, you will find articles that suggest that the Democrats are better for the economy. And they use the returns of the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the benchmark S&P 500 index as proof, as evidence. And they state that during particular administrations, when you compare the administrations of a Democrat president versus that of a Republican president, Democrats more often than not produce strong gains in the Dow, in the S&P 500, and you cannot say the same thing about Republicans. And so people will say, look, Democrats and the liberal economic policies are much better for the economy. And that's not necessarily true. I would say that, if anything, the data is inconclusive. And the reason I say that is that when you look at these historical analyses, you'll notice that they go way back. They go way back to when President Wilson was president, or even before that. And you have to understand that there is one historical anomaly when you look so far deep into history. And you look at the presidency of FDR. See, he took over the reins when the economy was in the heart of the Great Depression. So basically, no matter what president was in office, when you're at the very bottom, you can only go up from there. You hit rock bottom. It doesn't really matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whatever policies that you put in, eventually, if you're in office long enough, you will see the economy recover. That's just the natural human tendency when you hit rock bottom. Most economies, when they hit rock bottom, they don't go deeper into a further depression. That's why they call it rock bottom. So it's very unfair when you look, and it's actually, I don't want to say the term unfair, but I would say it is arbitrary when you're taking the FDR presidency into account, because the Great Depression was an unprecedented time in history. And also, you have to consider the statistical anomaly that can occur by using absolute time standards, absolute returns. And what I mean is that you look at the presidency of George W. Bush. Now, unfortunately, at the tail end of his administration, we saw the 2008 global financial crisis. So, of course, if we take an absolute time standard, we will say that when you compare the beginning of W's administration and the tail end of W's administration, that hard cutoff makes it appear that Bush did absolutely nothing right when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the stock market. But that's not true. That's very deceptive because you're using those absolute hard cutoffs. A hard cutoff when it comes to the beginning of his administration, and a hard cutoff when it comes to the end of the administration. A much more accurate representation would be if you used average data. When you take the average point total of the Dow Jones during the first year of W's presidency, and then you compare it to the final year, you take that average annual total of the Dow Jones in his final year of his presidency, and you find that actually George W. Bush, despite the 2008 collapse, he actually gained valuation for the Dow Jones against an average viewpoint. Now, of course, again, that's why I don't like the absolute comparison, because absolute comparison, you're taking a very specific a time frame and you're cutting it off right there. And it doesn't take into account all the fluctuations that occurred during that year or during a number of years. It's just taking one particular snapshot, one day, one closing price, and then comparing it to another closing price and ignoring all the stuff that happened in between. An average data analysis would take into consideration all those different dynamics because, of course, it is an average. It is not an absolute standard. So when you take a look, actually, at average valuations in the stock market, you will find that Republicans are actually better for the stock market than are the Democrats. And then you look at other key metrics. You look at average workers' wage growth, or you look at GDP growth, and you compare those two metrics, and then you juxtapose them onto either Democrat performance or Republican performance. And again, on those two key metrics, you find that the Republicans' conservative economic policies are much better for America than our liberal economic policies. In some cases, the differences are not that great. They don't have a very wide margin. Nevertheless, when you look at these long-term data points, and you're not looking at specific arbitrary snapshots in time, when you look at the long-term growth trends, you will find over and over and over again that conservative economic policies are simply better for the country as a whole and also better for the American worker.